All right, back here on this special edition of Open Line. Steve Layman with you tonight, joined by Dr. Jacques Boyd, the pastor at Mount Bethel Church, been around since 1885 in this great city serving North Nashville. Kevin Queen, the pastor at Cross Point, also with us tonight on the program. So many incredible things happening in the devastation after these storms, gentlemen. People in the community going into neighborhoods they haven't been to before, helping their neighbor, helping businesses get back on track, helping people clean up their lives, reaching out in various different ways. And you've just seen some miraculous types of things. A friend of mine actually was in North Nashville, and they walked upon a gentleman, his name was Greg, but he was standing in his front yard just sort of overwhelmed by the destruction of his home in front of him last week. And they walked up and simply said, "How can we help? Can we help you?" And Greg, I think a little discouraged at the moment, said, "Well, you can if you got chainsaws and a roofer," you know, sort of thinking that's way too much to ask. You can't nearly do that. And their answer was, "We do. Actually, that is exactly what we have here." Yeah. And they were able to get to work and get down to business and start to help them out. And I just thought it is amazing, again, to go back to when you pull together how much the community can do when you pull people together like that. And that was just one story. I imagine you guys have seen several of those over the past week. Dr. Boyd, let's start with you. Anything stick out to you in terms of the ways God has worked in the community?
Yes, the night of the storm, one of our members who lived on the street, house was destroyed. I was on scene immediately after the storm, and she came up the street crying. Talked about her house was gone, her car was gone, to come to the church for a place of safety to see it was gone. And as we stood in the middle of Cheatham Place, I could do nothing but hold her. I couldn't do nothing but console her. I couldn't do nothing but to allow her to cry in my arms, because it was a traumatic experience. But as soon as the day broke, to see the response from not only just North Nashville and Nashville in general, but people across the country who have entered into the community to see what they could do. It was amazing. She was displaced, but she was able to go live with a relative. She was able a few days later to salvage some things that wasn't thrown into the streets, and it was people that had helped with those moments. Our church had trees that had fallen down, and the next thing I know, there were chainsaws and backhoes cutting trees and pushing it to the side of the road for the debris to be cleaned up. So it was just an amazing sight to be seen.
Yeah, it really was. Kevin, what have you seen that is just, I don't know if blown, somebody got mad at me when I said, use the term blown away at the response, because they said you should expect this of people. But truly, this response has been extraordinary in my eyes.
It has. I think about out in Mount Juliet. I went out to Mount Juliet on Monday. We have a campus out there, and the stories, Kyle Sullivan's campus pastor out there, and 1,000 volunteers served through that campus out in that community. And Triple Crown, the neighborhood out there that was just devastated by the storm, but there was a group from Hendersonville that went out there to serve, and they got to a house and they saw a mom that was sitting on the porch, and she was just overwhelmed, just still in shock. And she had a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old there with her, and they said, "Is there anything we can do?" And she looked at her 5-year-old and she looked back at them. She said, he'd love to have his teddy bear. And so that group of 4, they started digging through the debris, and they dug through for 2 hours before they found that teddy bear. And they were able to give that teddy bear back. So it's just that little thing done with great love, that 2 hours of finding that symbol of hope for that child, for that family, and what that meant. And then the stories, you know, of people who went out to serve, and all they had were work gloves. There were a couple. There's a couple from Bellevue campus that were serving up in North Nashville, and they show up with their work gloves, and they're ready to help, but they just see that the job is so big, and they need chainsaws. And these two, this mom and her daughter, they didn't have chainsaws. Bree, she didn't have a chainsaw, and so they just had work gloves. And the lady said, "Well, I think we need chainsaws." Well, 2 guys walk up with chainsaws, and then 2 more guys, and pretty soon they have 20 volunteers. They have 4 chainsaws, and they're cleaning this entire. And what I love about that is sometimes it's taking that first step. Like that's what being a leader is just taking that first step, and then we find other people leading. So you've just seen those stories and the impact that it's made at all throughout Middle Tennessee. It's been been amazing.
It certainly has. I want to continue talking about ways people can help. So Hands On Nashville has been huge in organizing different types of things. For people who are at home thinking, all right, I either have been doing things or I want to get involved now. How do you recommend? I mean, churches are doing things, your church is doing things in your community. What's the organizational level like there, and where should people direct their attention most?
I mean, we say three things, like pray, give, and go. So we say prayer is not the only thing we do, just the first thing we do, right? And so I think prayer, God is the only person that's attracted to desperation. You know, desperate doesn't go real well in relationships, except with God. He's attracted to our desperation. So I think when we pray, we put our desperation on Him, and so I think as part of us, we want to just go out and fix. But I think when we work, we work. When we pray, God works. And so I think that's an important reminder that, man, to write. And I encourage people, just write down the things that you're praying for, and then to pray for different communities. Pray for. I think that's a great first step. The second is, I would say, to give. And there are organizations like Hands On. There's organizations. The
Community Foundation, Middle Tennessee, is doing a great job with donations.
Phenomenal work. So I think to give toward those organizations that are doing disaster relief. But then I think I don't think people should feel guilty if they weren't able to be out there that first week. So I just want to remove any sense of guilt or shame for those that weren't able to help. You can still be a part. This is going to be a long process, and so I'd say jump in, put on some work boots, and find some gloves, and in the days ahead there'll be opportunities. Jump in and serve. You know.
Dr. Boyd, for people who come to you to say, "What can I do?" What would you tell them immediately?
I will tell them, do what you can. We just heard a story of how two people showed up with just work gloves. Go with what you have, and allow God to do the rest. A lot of times we like to say, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or all you have to do is show up. God, allow Him to worry about the logistics. Allow Him to make provisions for you and for us. It's just so important. As he said, pray. Prayer is always appropriate. Giving is always appropriate. This is not a short-term fix, but a long-term solution. So maybe you don't have the time past this week to be out there, but give something. Every little bit helps, so someone else will be able to be out there in the field. So it's just so important that you do what you can and allow God to work out the details.
I really like you explained it, Kevin. You actually sort of gave it in checklist form. I really like that, because I spend a lot of time, probably too much time, on social media, given what I do and dealing with fans and all those sort of things. But whenever something happens, inevitably, somebody responds with thoughts and prayers. And then there's always the haters that say, stop with the thoughts and prayers, go do something. And as a Christian, that always bugs me, because my first thought is to pray, because I think God's way bigger than anything I am. But I love that checklist of pray first, because God's bigger than me, but then go do something. You can do both. It doesn't have to be social media where everything's 100% right or wrong. I like that.
And I think by praying first, that's the condition of your soul when you go in. You know, if we don't pray, we're like, I got to fix it, and so I got to go in my own strength. But when we pray, all that prayer is keeping company with God. You know, that we can keep company with God. It's the awareness of His presence, that He's leading in His work. So when we pray, we have our eyes open to what's God doing here. You know, not just what am I going to do in this situation. So I think that's important, to bring those two things together. And I think that's what we're seeing right now in Middle Tennessee.
We definitely are. All right, we got to take our final break. We'll come back and wrap things up with this gentleman right after this.